Welcome to HOA Karen Gets Denied. Keep your boots on for this one. I am standing on my front sidewalk in Syracuse, New York on a February morning when Gloria Moore storms across the street holding a clipboard and yelling that I have damaged HOA property. She is wearing her reflective vest like she is directing a construction crew, pink earmuffs clamped over her dark brown wavy hair, and a gray parka that makes her look like she is about to issue a parking ticket to the entire neighborhood. She stops 3 feet from me, breath fogging in the freezing air, and shouts that the salt stain on my concrete is vandalism. I tell her it is rock salt I bought at the hardware store to keep people from slipping. She says the covenants prohibit chemical alteration of common walkways, and she is fining me $200 effective immediately. I point out that this is my sidewalk, not common property. She pulls a portable thermal printer from her parka pocket, sets it on the porch railing, and prints a violation notice on the spot. The paper is still warm when she shoves it in my hand. She says, "I have all day, and so does my fine meter." Then she turns and walks back to her car, vest flashing in the weak winter sun. My name is Dan. I am a firefighter on rotating shifts, which means I work 24 hours on and 48 hours off, and my sleep schedule is a mess. I moved to this neighborhood in Syracuse 2 years ago because the house was affordable and close to the station. The Winchell Way Snow Route Association runs this community, and until this winter they were annoying but manageable. They send reminders about trash cans and lawn height, but nothing insane. Then Gloria Moore got elected to the finance committee, and she decided that winter enforcement was her personal mission. The stakes for me are higher than they sound. My health has been fragile, asthma that flares up in cold weather, and sleep disruption is making it worse. I need rest between shifts or I start making mistakes at work. Gloria does not care. She has decided that every salt stain, every snow pile, every icy patch is a violation, and she is going to fine me until I break. The notice she handed me lists the violation as unauthorized chemical application to pedestrian infrastructure. It gives me 72 hours to remove the stain, pay the fine, and submit a remediation plan. I check my watch because I have deadlines, a shift starting in 6 hours, and I need to sleep before that. I walk inside, close the door, and stare at the paper. The thermal ink is already fading at the edges. I take a photo of it with my phone, then I go online and pull up the covenants. I search for anything about salt or sidewalks. There is a section about snow removal timelines, which I have followed. There is a section about landscaping chemicals, which does not mention salt. There is nothing about salt stains being property damage. I write an email to the board explaining that I used standard rock salt sold at every store in Syracuse and asking them to cancel the fine. I attach the photo, I send it, and go to bed. 2 days later, I get a response. It is from Gloria, not the board president. She says my appeal is denied because the finance committee has discretion over damage assessments, and she has determined that my sidewalk now requires resurfacing to match neighborhood standards. She is adding a $300 assessment for repairs. She CCs the entire board. I check my watch again. I am due at the station in an hour, and I call the board president, a guy named Ed who works in insurance. He does not pick up. I leave a message asking him to call me back. He never does. The next morning, I wake up to find a second notice taped to my front door. This one is printed on regular paper, not thermal, and it says I am in violation of emergency snow route rules. It lists my truck as illegally parked during a snow event. I look outside. My truck is in my driveway, exactly where it always is. There is no snow event, just the usual February slush. I pull the notice off the door and read it again. It says that under emergency snow route enforcement, the HOA can designate any vehicle as an obstruction and authorize towing without prior notice. It says my truck was towed at 6 this morning and is now at a yard on the north side. I run to the driveway. My truck is gone. I call the tow yard. A clerk tells me the HOA submitted a request under emergency authority, and my truck is being held pending payment of towing fees and storage. The fees are $400. I ask who authorized it. The clerk says it is in the system as an HOA compliance tow. I ask for documentation. The clerk says the HOA paperwork is missing and wants me to prove chain of custody before they release anything. I tell him I will be there in an hour and hang up. I check my watch. I have a shift in 5 hours. I call a ride and head to the yard. When I get there, I find my truck parked behind a chain link fence. The clerk, a bored guy in a Carhartt jacket, tells me I need to pay the fees first, then they will locate the authorization. I ask to see the original request. He shrugs and says it was submitted online. I take out my phone and call the Winchell Way office number. No answer. I leave a message. I pay the fees with my credit card because I need the truck for my shift, and the clerk gives me a release form. I drive home, already 20 minutes behind schedule. That afternoon, while I am at the station, I get an email from Gloria. She says my appeal of the towing was reviewed and denied because emergency snow route enforcement supersedes normal parking rules. She says the covenants grant the board authority to act immediately during weather events, and my truck was an obstruction. She says if I continue to park in violation, future tows will include a $500 obstruction fee on top of towing and storage. She ends the email with, I can make this a lean conversation in one email. I read it twice, checking my watch because we just got a call and I need to suit up. I forward the email to my personal account and make a note to look up lean procedures when I get home. Over the next week, I start gathering proof. I take photos of my sidewalk next to 3 other sidewalks on my block. All of them have salt stains. 2 of them are worse than mine, big white streaks that look like someone dumped an entire bag in one spot. None of those houses have violation notices. I take photos of my driveway with my truck parked in the same spot it has been for 2 years. I pull up weather records showing there was no snow event on the day of the towing. I screenshot Gloria's emails. I make a folder on my phone and label it HOA evidence. I check my watch constantly because the courthouse has shortened winter hours and I must file paperwork before they close, but I do not know what paperwork yet. One night, I am shoveling the driveway after a light snowfall when a neighbor walks over. His name is Carl, a retired teacher who has lived here for 15 years. He is wearing a puffy jacket and a knit cap, and he is holding a thick binder. He says he heard about my trouble with Gloria. I tell him she is fining me for salt stains and towed my truck under fake emergency rules. He nods and says Gloria has been doing this to people all winter. He opens the binder. Inside are printed copies of the covenants, highlighted and tabbed. He flips to a section about parking and reads it out loud. It says emergency snow route enforcement applies only to streets designated in the annual snow plan, and the plan must be published to all homeowners by November 1st. He asks if I got a snow plan. I tell him no. He says neither did anyone else, because Gloria never published one. He says she is making up emergency authority as she goes. I ask him if he has copies of this. He hands me the binder and says keep it, I have another set. Carl tells me there is more. He says Gloria added mysterious line items to the budget last fall, things like compliance technology upgrades and vendor retainer fees. But no one knows what vendors or what technology. He says the board approved it without asking questions because Gloria presents everything as urgent financial necessity. He says if I want to fight this, I need to go after the process, not just the fines. He tells me to file a records request for all snow enforcement actions this winter, all towing authorizations, and all vendor contracts related to compliance. He says if Gloria is using HOA funds to pay for her portable printer and her towing deals, that is a problem for the whole board. I thank him and take the binder inside. I sit at my kitchen table and read the highlighted sections. Carl is right. The covenants are clear. Emergency authority requires a published plan. Parking enforcement requires written notice. Damage assessments require an inspection and a repair estimate from a licensed contractor. Gloria has done none of this. I check my watch. It is 9 at night. The courthouse is closed. I write an email to the board requesting copies of the snow plan, the towing authorization for my truck, and any vendor agreements related to compliance enforcement. I send it to the board president and CC the entire board, including Gloria. The next morning, I get a reply from Gloria. She says records requests must be submitted in writing on the official form, and there is a $30 processing fee per category. She says requests can take up to 30 days to fulfill. She attaches a PDF of the form. I print it, fill it out, and mail it with a check. Then I start working on my backup plan. I wrote down every word because later I plan to read them back to her. A week later, I get a new notice. This one is taped to my mailbox. It says I am in violation of snow pile placement rules. It says I created an obstruction by piling snow from my driveway onto the curb strip, which is HOA common property. It says I have 48 hours to remove the snow or face a $500 fine and possible legal action. I walk out to the curb. The snow pile is 2 feet high and 3 feet wide, exactly like every other snow pile on the block. I take more photos. I add them to my folder. I check my watch. I am due at the station in 3 hours. That afternoon, while I am at the station, Carl calls me. He says Gloria just tried to find him for an icy patch on his walkway. He says she showed up with her clipboard and her vest, took photos, and threatened him with a slip hazard citation. He says he told her the covenants do not give her authority to inspect private property without notice, and she said she does not need notice during a safety emergency. He says she left, but she will be back. He asks if I have heard anything from the board. I tell him no, just more fines. He says we need to force this into a public meeting before she bankrupts half the neighborhood. I agree. I check the HOA website. The next board meeting is in 10 days, February 23rd. I mark it on my calendar. I decide I am going to show up with my evidence folder, Carl's binder, and a printed timeline of every fine, every email, and every towing fee. I check my watch. The courthouse closes in 90 minutes. I leave the station early, drive downtown, and walk into the county clerk's office. I ask how to file a complaint against an HOA for improper enforcement. The clerk gives me a form for a state procedure complaint that forces the HOA to respond. I fill it out on the counter, listing every violation notice, every denied appeal, every missing document. I pay the filing fee and get a stamped copy. The complaint goes into the system that day. That night, I get a call from the HOA board president, Ed. He sounds annoyed. He says I filed a state complaint without trying to resolve this internally. I tell him I tried. I sent emails, I called, I submitted an appeal, and I got nothing but more fines and a records denial. He says the board is reviewing my situation and they will discuss it at the next meeting. I ask if Gloria will be there. He says, of course, she is on the finance committee. I tell him that is the problem. He hangs up. Over the next week, Gloria escalates again. I get a notice saying my mailbox post is a snow safety hazard because ice has formed around the base. I get another notice saying my porch light is angled incorrectly and creating glare on the sidewalk, which could cause a slip. I get a third notice saying my trash cans were visible from the street for 6 minutes longer than allowed on collection day. Each notice comes with a fine. Each fine references Emergency Winter Enforcement Authority. I take photos of everything. I add every notice to my folder. I check my watch obsessively because I know the meeting is coming and I need to be ready. 3 days before the meeting, Carl calls me again. He says Gloria just blocked traffic in the mailbox lane. He says she parked her car sideways across the lane, got out with her clipboard, and started checking mailbox posts for code violations while cars backed up behind her. He says people were honking, she ignored them, and when someone yelled at her, she said she was conducting official HOA business and they could wait. He says it went on for 10 minutes before she finally moved. He says a security guard from the clubhouse came out and just hovered near the door, watching, but did not intervene. I tell Carl I am going to bring all of this up at the meeting. He says he is coming too, and he is bringing his binder. The night before the meeting, I organize everything. I print a timeline showing every fine, every email, every denied appeal. I print Carl's highlighted covenant sections. I print my comparison photos showing other sidewalks with worse salt stains and no fines. I print weather records showing there was no snow event on the day of the towing. I put it all in a tabbed binder. No readable text on the tabs, just numbered sections. Then I add the one piece I have been holding back. Last week, I tracked down a former board member, a woman named Susan, who quit last year after a fight with Gloria. I asked her why she quit. She told me Gloria tried to push through a vendor contract without a vote, and when Susan objected, Gloria threatened to audit her property for violations. Susan gave me a signed statement describing the threat and Gloria's pattern of using enforcement as retaliation. I had the statement notarized. I put it in the back of the binder. I wrote down every word, because later I planned to read them back to her. The meeting is held at the clubhouse on a frozen Thursday night. Freezing rain is turning slush into glass, and the parking lot is a skating rink. I park carefully and walk to the entrance, carrying my binder. Carl is already there, standing near the door with his own binder. We go inside together. The meeting room is set up with a long table at the front for the board and rows of folding chairs for homeowners. About 20 people are already seated. Gloria is at the board table, wearing her gray parka even though the room is warm, pink earmuffs pushed back on her head. Her portable thermal printer is sitting on the table in front of her. She sees me and her expression hardens. Ed calls the meeting to order. He goes through the usual business, budget updates, landscaping bids, and then he says they are going to address a compliance matter involving a homeowner complaint. He does not say my name. Gloria stands up. She says there has been an unprecedented level of resistance to winter safety enforcement this year, and the board needs to support the Finance Committee's authority to act quickly during weather events. She says homeowners who refuse to comply are putting the entire community at risk. She says fines and towing are necessary tools. She does not mention me by name, but everyone knows who she is talking about. I raise my hand. Ed nods at me. I stand up and say I want to respond. I walk to the front and set my binder on a folding chair. I open it to the timeline. I say Gloria has fined me 6 times in 3 weeks for violations that either do not exist in the covenants or are selectively enforced. I point to the comparison photos. I say 3 other houses on my block have worse salt stains and no fines. I point to the weather records. I say my truck was towed on a day with no snow event and no published emergency plan. I point to Carl's binder. I say the covenants require a published snow plan by November 1st, and no one received one. Gloria interrupts. She says the board approved emergency procedures verbally in December, and she is acting under that authority. I ask her to show me the minutes from that meeting. She says the minutes are not finalized yet. I ask when they will be finalized. She does not answer. Carl stands up. He says he has been a homeowner here for 15 years and he has never seen enforcement this aggressive or this selective. He says Gloria is using winter rules as an excuse to target people she does not like. He opens his binder and reads the parking section out loud, the part about emergency authority requiring a published plan. He says Gloria is making up rules as she goes. Gloria's face goes red. She says Carl does not understand how compliance works, and he is enabling people who want to turn the neighborhood into a slum. Several people in the audience start talking at once. Ed bangs a gavel, which I did not know HOAs had, and tells everyone to calm down. I decide it is time. I pull out the notarized statement from Susan. I say I have evidence that Gloria has used enforcement as retaliation before. I start reading the statement out loud. Susan describes how Gloria threatened her with a property audit after she questioned a vendor contract. Susan describes how Gloria told her she could make this a lean conversation in one email, the exact same phrase Gloria used with me. The room goes silent. Gloria stands up and says that is a lie. I hold up the statement and say it is notarized. I say I also have a state procedure complaint on file, and the county is going to require the board to produce every document I requested, whether Gloria wants to release them or not. Ed looks at Gloria. He asks if she threatened Susan. Gloria says Susan quit because she could not handle the responsibility of board service. Ed asks again. Gloria says compliance is not a popularity contest. Ed closes his notebook. He says the board is going to take a 10-minute recess and discuss this in private. He tells everyone to stay seated. The board gets up and walks into a side office. The door closes. The room stays quiet for about 30 seconds, then everyone starts talking. A woman in the front row says Gloria fined her for a snow pile last week. A man in the back says Gloria tried to tow his car from his own driveway. Carl leans over and says this is working. I check my watch. It is 8:30. My shift starts at 6 tomorrow morning, and I need sleep. 10 minutes later, the board comes back. Ed sits down and says the board has reviewed the evidence, and they are suspending all pending fines against me pending a full audit of winter enforcement actions. He says the board is also going to require the finance committee to submit a written enforcement checklist before issuing any new violations. He says Gloria will remain on the committee, but her authority to issue immediate fines is revoked. Gloria stands up and says the board is undermining safety. Ed tells her to sit down. She does not. She picks up her thermal printer and her clipboard and walks toward the door. On her way out, a gust of wind from the entrance hits her. Her clipboard flies open and pages go everywhere, scattering across the tile floor. Karen's printed packet goes airborne in a gust of snow that blows in from outside as someone opens the door. People start laughing. Gloria does not stop. She walks out into the freezing rain and slams the door. The meeting ends shortly after. Ed says they will send out an update once the audit is complete. People start filing out. Carl shakes my hand and says we did it. I thank him and head to my truck. The parking lot is a sheet of ice. I drive home carefully, checking my watch. It is 9:15. I have 8 hours before I need to be at the station. The next week is quiet. No new notices. No emails from Gloria. I keep checking my mailbox, expecting another violation, but nothing comes. Carl calls me and says he heard Gloria missed the last 2 finance committee meetings. He says rumor is the board told her to take a break while they review her enforcement actions. 2 weeks later, I get an email from Ed. He says the board completed the audit. He says they found that Gloria issued 43 violation notices this winter, 38 of them in the last 2 months. He says only 6 of those notices were for violations that clearly exist in the covenants. The rest were either selective enforcement, misinterpretations, or outright fabrications. He says the board is refunding all fines issued under Gloria's emergency authority. He says my fine total was $800 and my towing fees were $400, and I will get a check for $1,200 within 30 days. He says the board is also adopting a new enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics. He says any future violation must cite a specific covenant section and include photographic evidence of the violation. He says fines cannot be issued without a 7-day cure period. He says emergency towing requires a published snow plan and a documented weather event. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama where the enforcer gets what they deserve. I forward the email to Carl. He calls me and says this is a huge win. I agree, but I know Gloria is not going to let it go. I am right. 3 days later, I get a text from a number I do not recognize. It says, "You think you won, but I am going to make sure everyone knows you are a liar and a troublemaker." I screenshot it and send it to Ed. He calls me an hour later and says the board just held an emergency meeting. He says they voted to remove Gloria from the finance committee and bar her from any enforcement role. He says if she contacts me again, I should call the police. That night, Carl texts me and says there is something happening at the clubhouse. I drive over. There are about a dozen cars in the parking lot. Inside, I find an impromptu meeting. Ed is there, along with most of the board and about 20 homeowners. Ed sees me and waves me over. He says they called this meeting to address the fallout from Gloria's enforcement spree. He says they want to vote on new bylaws that prevent any single board member from having unilateral enforcement authority. He says they are also going to vote on whether to remove Gloria from the board entirely. The vote happens quickly. The bylaws pass unanimously. The removal vote passes 14-2. Gloria is not present. The next morning, I get another email from Ed. He says the board met with the tow company Gloria used for my truck and several others. He says when they showed the company owner the notarized statement from Susan and the timeline of selective enforcement, the owner realized Gloria had been using their services for personal retaliation. I show it to the tow company owner and they cut ties immediately. Ed says the company is refunding all towing fees to affected homeowners and will no longer accept HOA requests unless they are submitted by the board president with documented cause. Over the next few weeks, things settle down. I get my refund check. Carl gets a refund too, along with a letter apologizing for the icy patch citation. The board publishes a new snow plan for next year, clearly listing which streets are emergency routes and what constitutes a weather event. The enforcement checklist is posted on the HOA website. Gloria does not resign from the neighborhood, but she stays quiet. I see her once, driving past my house, and she does not look at me. By the time March arrives and the snow starts to melt, the neighborhood feels different. People are friendlier. The compliance culture has eased. Carl tells me 3 other homeowners have filed complaints about old violations, and the board is reviewing all of them under the new checklist. He says the board is talking about hiring a professional management company to handle enforcement, so no single person can weaponize the rules again. One afternoon in early April, I am sitting on my porch when Carl walks over. He is carrying a folder. He says he got a letter from the county. The state procedure complaint I filed triggered an investigation, and the county found that the Winchell Way Snow Route Association violated multiple procedure requirements under state HOA law. The county issued a formal finding and required the board to adopt corrective policies. Carl says the finding is public record, which means any future board will have to follow the new rules or risk state sanctions. He hands me a copy of the finding. I read it and smile. It lists every procedural failure, every missing document, every selective enforcement action. It is a complete vindication. Carl sits down next to me. He says he heard Gloria is moving. I ask where. He says he does not know, just that she listed her house last week. He says good riddance. I agree. We sit there for a while, watching the last patches of snow melt off the sidewalk. No salt stains. No violation notices. Just spring arriving in Syracuse the way it is supposed to. That night, I get a final email from Ed. He says the board held a vote and decided to formally apologize to me and every other homeowner who was targeted during the winter enforcement wave. He says the apology will be included in the next newsletter along with a summary of the new policies. He says the board also voted to cover my legal and filing costs related to the state complaint. He attaches a check request form. I fill it out and send it back. A week later, the newsletter arrives in my mailbox. The apology is on the front page. It acknowledges that enforcement actions were inconsistent, punitive, and not supported by the covenants. It promises that future enforcement will be transparent, fair, and based on clear written policies. It thanks homeowners for their patience during the transition. I read it twice, then I put it in my HOA evidence folder and closed the folder for good. The following month, I run into the security guard who hovered near the clubhouse door during the mailbox lane incident. He tells me he was ordered not to intervene unless someone called the police. He says he wanted to tell Gloria to move her car, but the board had told him to stay neutral during compliance actions. He says he is glad the board changed the rules because he hated watching people get harassed. I thank him and tell him it is over now. By summer, the neighborhood has moved on. The board hires a management company. The new enforcement process requires written notices with cure periods, photographic evidence, and citations to specific covenant sections. Fines are issued only after a hearing. Towing requires board approval and a documented emergency. Carl gets elected to the board and becomes the new compliance chair. He carries a copy of the covenants everywhere and uses them to shut down any attempt to revive Gloria's tactics. I see Gloria one more time, in late June, loading boxes into a moving truck. She does not acknowledge me. I do not wave. I just watch her drive away, and then I go inside and take a nap before my next shift. My health is better. My sleep schedule is stable. The HOA is boring again, which is exactly how it should be. The story ends on a quiet Saturday in July. I am mowing the lawn when Carl walks over with a cold drink. He says the board just got a letter from the state confirming that the Winchell Way Snow Route Association is now in full compliance with procedure laws. He says the corrective policies are permanent and enforceable. He says if anyone tries to pull what Gloria did, the state can step in immediately. I take the drink and we sit on the porch steps, watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. Carl says this is what an HOA is supposed to be. Neighbors helping each other, not neighbors terrorizing each other. I agree. That night, I am sitting at my kitchen table when I get a text from an unknown number. It says, "I heard you got your refund. Congratulations, you won. I do not recognize the number, but I know who it is." I delete the text and block the number. I check my watch. It is 9:30. I have a shift tomorrow, and I need sleep. I turn off my phone and go to bed, knowing that for the first time in months, I am not going to wake up to a violation notice or a threatening email. The HOA nightmare is over. The enforcer is gone. The rules are fair. And I can finally rest. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all the support.